Okay, this is your second lecture for week 5. Um, I want to start off by just saying again, I am sorry we have to present information this way, that we have to cover class this way. I'm actually doing much better than I was even just a couple days ago. Um, I'm not sure. I may be able to hold class next week, but so keep posted, keep checking emails and checking the website, and we'll see how this goes. I would much rather be in the classroom with you, talking about the issues that are coming up, and working through ideas together. But this is the second best way we have to do it, which is to just kind of record a lecture, present ideas on our website, talk about those ideas. So this lecture is about divine command theory. This week, we are starting our first framework of ethics, our first ethical theory, and we're going to be doing this for the rest of the semester, looking at different frameworks, different ways that ethicists, philosophers have come up with how to decide what is ethical or how to make ethical decisions. The first one we're looking at is divine command theory. And it's kind of natural that this is the first one because this is probably the first one that people came up with when they first started thinking about what is right and what is wrong. They looked to the sky and said, what would God want? So we're going to get into this now and talk about what divine command theory is. It's actually a fairly simple theory once you start to think about it. And then we'll end the lecture by talking about Project One. You are expected to watch this lecture. You're expected to to think about this lecture. The topics in this lecture and in our readings this week will show up on an exam, so you do need to be familiar with it. So let's move to talking about divine command theory. We'll just start with asking, how do we know what is right and what is wrong? Where does that knowledge come from? I mean, I think most of us would probably say that there are some set values or some set truths of what is right and what is wrong. It's wrong for me to just walk up to you and hit you. It's wrong for me to pick my nose and flick a booger at you. Those are some things that we can probably guess are right or wrong. It's right for me to smile at you, or to uh, to share my food with you if you have no food. We can probably guess some things that are right and wrong, but how do we know what is right and wrong? Well, the images here on the screen give us a few ways that we think about what is right and wrong. The first would be your parents. Your parents tell you what is right and wrong. You learn from your parents, or another way to think about this would be our cultural knowledge, cultural knowledge that gets passed down through our parents or through the culture around us. It is just unquestionable what is right and wrong because you don't question mom or dad. And we see Will Smith with his mom, or the actress, his mom, telling him what is right and wrong. On the right hand side at the top of the screen, we have Homer with Angel Homer and Devil Homer on his shoulders. And this is a way of representing our conscience. Some people would say the way we know what is right and wrong is through our conscience. We feel that something is right or something is wrong, and that should determine what is right or wrong. That goes a little bit into divine command theory, and we'll get into that question here in just a few minutes. But the conscience doesn't necessarily come from God. Some people would just say it is just this feeling we have that we build maybe over time or that we're born with. The one at the bottom left is a police officer, and that represents, how do we know what is right and wrong? Well, we know that what is right and wrong is determined by the law, by what is told to us by the law. And that is another cultural representation of what is right and wrong, but it's an external cultural representation for everybody. The law is the same for everybody, or it should be, even though it's not always. Another way of knowing what is right and wrong, it comes in the middle, and that is another cultural representation, and that would be through preachers or through our religious leaders. They know what's right and wrong, and they tell us. Now that's an extension of divine command theory, but it's a little bit different because right and wrong gets interpreted through our religious leaders rather than through our feelings or our prayers or a religious text. The religious leader comes in and says, this is right and this is wrong, and we follow them. And then similarly, another one on the bottom right is we get taught what is right and wrong. We get taught what is right and wrong by the adults in our life, by our classrooms, by our schools, by what we read. We learn what is right and wrong through an intellectual way of determining what our ethics are. This origins of ethical thinking or origins of morality quickly moves to metaphysical questions. Now, metaphysics is another type of philosophy. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. It is the philosophy of how do we know what is the truth? How do we know what is God? Where do we come from? It is those kind of bigger questions about the nature of the universe and the nature of truth. Well, when we start thinking about where does ethics come from, where does our ethical thinking come from, we naturally move into metaphysical questions. How do the nature of truth, the nature of a God, the nature of the soul, the nature of personal autonomy play in determining morality? What roles do these things play? Is morality part of truth? Is it part of a God? Is it part of the soul? Is it part of just your personal decision making? This leads us to more questions. Does our ethical thinking come from the outside of us or from within? How do we know when our ethical thinking is correct or justifiable? Now, we often don't think about this. We don't move to this further thought when we're just making decisions. But I think this is an important one, especially for philosophy. How do we know that ethical thinking is correct? Or, alternatively, how can we justify our ethical thinking? Number 3, should external issues affect ethical decisions, or is right and wrong? That is, do we just have a set truth of what is right and what is wrong? Or is what is right or wrong different in different contexts? And number 4, should outcome affect whether ethical decisions are right or wrong? That is, when we get to what happens as a result of our decisions, does that tell us that it was right or wrong? Or is it always right and wrong just based on the initial problem? These questions mean that we have to come up with some answers for how we determine right and wrong. What is ethical? What is moral? One of those answers is divine command theory. So I didn't create this slide. This comes from a different professor, but I like it, or at least present some ideas for us in a way to lock down divine command theory. Divine command theory is a philosophical theory that suggests that morality and ethical behavior are derived from the commands of God or gods. Divine command theory is a theory that says our ethics, or what is moral, comes from God. Now, we can expand that a little bit. It doesn't necessarily have to be God to be a divine command theory. It could just be the all-powerful or the power in our lives. As children, our parents are often function like gods. We can't think of anything other than mom or dad as being the all-powerful. And that's natural, right? We don't know anything about God when we're born. God is this concept that gets developed culturally, depending on where we live. So our parents are the all-powerful. Now, as soon as we become, 10, we start to build more awareness that there are other powers out there and that maybe mom and dad aren't always reliable. But from the very start, divine command theory is this all-powerful being that tells us what is right and wrong. We can trace this is one part of this slide I disagree with. Divine command theory can be traced back to antiquity when Greek philosophers like Plato pondered whether a higher power had established an absolute moral code. And divine command theory naturally just goes back to the nature of humanity when we look to the sky and say, where did we come from? And if the answer to that is from a God, then we have to then ask, does God tell us what to do now that we're here? So here are the key concepts of divine command theory. The first, God's sovereignty. God's will is absolute and is the foundation for all moral principles. God is solely the source of what is good, what is moral. Objective moral standards, they exist beyond human opinion or cultural relativism. So we can't, what is good or what is true does not change based on what's happening in culture or based on our own opinions. It is outside of us from a God. And moral simplicity, every action can be definitively categorized as right or wrong based on God's commands. God's commands tell us what is right and wrong, and that is the only decision maker. So let's take a look at a couple of ways that divine command theory gets developed over time. The first is the most basic. You have God, then you have law, God's law, and then you have being good. That's the most basic kind of command theory. God's law, being good. Now, we can complicate that in so many different ways. Like, for instance, the Ten Commandments gets translated in multiple languages by multiple people, and the Ten Commandments is written on paper by people. So when we look at it that way, we can say, well, maybe God's law is not clear, or maybe it's not accurate. This is one reason why the biblical story of Moses getting commandments written on tablets is this idea of God speaking directly to people, because God knows we need something written, so he writes it himself on tablets. So the basic idea of divine command theory, God, law, that means when we follow that, we are being good. Another way of looking at divine command theory is that God's law, or the good, is internal to humans. It is part of us. It is built into us. And it's built into us by a divine presence or an all-powerful being. We are born with the good because God designed it that way. And that good exists within our mind or our soul. We know what the good is because it is put into us. And that leads us to right action. We act correctly because the good exists within us. That moves into different theories as we move on, and we're going to talk about one of those next week. But the basic idea is either that God determines law and we follow law, or God puts the good in us and we follow what is in us. And our two major ethical readings for this week, the Ten Commandments and al-Ghazali, are the two representations of these ideas. The Ten Commandments is the written law, and al-Ghazali finds the good within himself from God. It's important to note that, if God is writing your law on tablets, on stone, and it exists, that it's kind of unquestionable, right? You cannot covet your neighbor's wife because it's there within the stone. Al-Ghazali gets a little bit more complicated because it does require humans to interpret what that light is. Now, Al-Ghazali would say there is no interpretation. In fact, in the start of his passage that we read, he starts with what we feel, what our feelings lead us to, and then he moves to an intellectual sense. How we can think through problems of morality, and ultimately he has to come to, it's not just what we feel or our ecstasy that gets us to what is good, and it's not our mind that gets us to what is good. Instead, God puts the good in us, the light which God sheds in the heart. It is part of us when God reveals it. Those, again, are our two basic strands of divine command theory: written law coming from God, or internal law written by God. As our video showed us, there are some problems with divine command theory we might consider. And the basic problem is presented by Plato in the Euthyphro dialogue. Um, I was going to have us read it, but I think it's just enough to just talk about it. Now, the Euthyphro dialogue is about a guy who meets Socrates outside of a court of law. He's going in to report his father for breaking a law because that's the right thing to do. And Socrates wants to know, well, how do you know that's right? And Euthyphro says, well, because the gods tell us what is right. And this leads to the question, to the major dilemma. Is good good because God says so? Do we know that the good is good because God says so? Or is God good because he submits to the good? Do we know what is good because it exists and God makes it true? What this is about is, like, where does the good come from? Does the good come from God, or does the good pre-exist God, and God just brings it along and enforces it? It's an important question when it comes to divine command theory, because that leads Socrates to come up with two possible outcomes. If the good is good because God says so, how do we know we can trust God? How do we know that God is reliable and consistent? Or if the good pre-exists God and God is just the enforcer or the interpreter of the good, then is God really God? Is God really all powerful? Or is there something that exists before him or her? Let's apply this a little differently. Let's just think of mom. If good is good because mom says so, good is arbitrary based on the whims, on the feelings, on how mom's feeling that day. And we can look at this because sometimes moms base their opinions on outdated law, on outdated ideas. Sometimes new science comes along that proves our moms wrong. Or sometimes the things that moms base their ideas on are inaccurate texts or a misunderstanding. And frankly, mom can be manipulated. She can change her laws based on how we manipulate her. That's the first problem. If God pre-exists and determines the law, well, it's a little bit arbitrary because we can see laws have changed. We can see that science comes along that changes our moral views. We can see that inaccurate texts might influence how humans act, or that God can be manipulated by human agents. Let me give you an example of this. Your mom tells you that you need to go to bed by 10 p.m. And then a few years later, you need to go to bed by 12 p.m. And then a few years after that, there's no bedtime. Now, what we can rationalize that, okay, it was actually, the law was actually, when you are 7 years old, you need to go to bed by 10 p.m. When you are 12 years old, you need to go to bed by 11. And then when you're 17 years old, there's no bedtime. Maybe that's the extra part of the law, but for some people, that changing nature of the law means that mom is arbitrary. It's just whatever she decides in the moment, and that's not reliable. We can apply this to humans and to God. Let's just take the question of gay marriage. When I was growing up, gay marriage was pretty inconceivable. It wasn't even a topic of discussion because we couldn't even get to the point where we realized that being gay was a natural state of being a person. Now, some people clearly believe this, and some people believe that gay marriage should have happened, but it wasn't a cultural topic of conversation. It didn't come out that way. Instead, being gay was just kind of being weird. I'll remind you, I grew up in the 80s, in the 70s and the 80s, so I'm a little bit old. Around 2009, when the laws about gay marriage changed, and gay marriage became legal under the law, cultural opinion about homosexuality, about being queer, about being gay, trans, bi, it changed. Our belief systems changed, and churches actually changed. What God says or what God believes changed based on human interpretation. Now, this is not a question of what your God says or what your religious text says. This is just a question of how it happened in culture. And the truth of the matter is that our beliefs as a culture changed about what is right and wrong when it comes to homosexuality or being queer. It doesn't even have to be something that is maybe controversial. I don't think it's controversial anymore. I think most people kind of accept that it was wrong to ever tell queer people that they shouldn't exist. But we can change this to just like the example of wearing a type of clothing made out of a type of animal skin. If it was wrong because it was part of the law in Deuteronomy way back when, shouldn't it be wrong now? What changed? Well, the fact that it changed means that God or mom may be arbitrary. Okay, let's go to the second one. If the truth of good exists outside of mom, then mom's law is irrelevant. So if good comes before mom, and mom is just the one who enforces it, mom is the one who tells us what to do, mom is the one who explains it, then mom is kind of irrelevant because it already existed. That is, truth is preeminent. It already exists outside of mom. And mom is just an arbiter of truth. She just is the one who interprets it. But you know what? Mom is fallible. We can't always believe that she's going to tell us the exact truth, or that she's going to give us what that truth might mean. And this also takes away a little bit the idea of agency, our ability as individuals to understand the truth and to make it meaningful for ourselves. We've got to have somebody that interprets it. Well, you can see that if mom is just telling us what is true based on what she finds out there in truth, she's kind of unnecessary. Why can't humans just access the truth? Why do we need mom there? And we apply this to God. If truth exists before God, and God is just the one who tells us what is true and enforces what is true, then God is kind of unnecessary. As humans, we have enough agency to be able to understand truth ourselves. And truth doesn't have any meaning if we can't understand it. So why not just knock God out of the picture? The problem with the Euthyphro problem is that it calls into question how do we determine what is morality? And it kind of knocks the divine command theory off its axis. It's hard to see divine command theory when you ask these two questions, because either God is arbitrary, changes his mind, and our truth change because God just decides whatever it is that he wants to decide at that point, or truth exists outside of God, and God is not the actual truth. And neither of those are really things we want to think about God. And so we ignore that problem and just say God's law is God's law. It's an interesting problem. Divine command theories, not actually all that complicated of a theory, except for when it starts to grow into something else. But the Euthyphro problem is kind of interesting because it does get to that metaphysical question of what is the nature of God. So next week, we're going to move into natural law theory, which is an extension of divine command theory, but it tries to do something a little bit more with this idea of divine command and what it means to experience the good or the truth. I want to talk a little bit about our question journal for Project One. You'll see if you look at the website right now, there is a preparation assignment to help you prepare for Project One that's actually part of Project One. And that preparation assignment is going to ask you to create ethical problems, ethical questions over the next 4 weeks. You're expected to create one for every class period we have, or basically 2 a week. And those questions should not just be like, is sneezing without covering your mouth wrong, right? That's too simplistic. I want you to write it out a little bit. Write out the problem, write out the question that will pose an ethical problem for you to work out. And you're going to come up with 8 of those over the next 4 weeks. I'm going to expect you to write them out, have them prepared, and ready to think about. And we're actually going to cover some of them in class. I'm going to ask you what your questions are. I would like you to write these by hand, although I understand if you want to type it, that's fine. You can do it. But writing by hand actually gets you to slow down a little bit and think about this a little bit and go back and edit it as you're going. Those questions are going to be important for Project 1. So let's take a look at Project 1. I'm going to just go ahead and show you the whole project language and read it and talk about it with you. And then you can go ahead and get started. There's a lot of language for one slide, but it's easier for me to just stay within the slideshow rather than to jump over to Moodle. So for your first project, you're going to use your ethical questions journal to select 3 of your questions and develop clear, well thought out, sophisticated answers based on ethical thinking. So you've got this question journal you're working on for the next 4 weeks, 8 questions. You're going to select 3 of those, and you're going to develop sophisticated answers using philosophy. Your goal here will be to present each question, develop answers for each based on different ethical frameworks we have covered in class, and then present each question and answer individually in an interesting way for an audience. So you've got the questions, you got the stuff we're looking at in class, and then you're going to develop those questions with the stuff we're working on in class and present it for an audience. Here are the guidelines. Each of your 3 questions must appear in your ethical questions journal. Number 2, you will write up your question clearly, making it clear both what the parameters of the situation are and what the exact ethical questions it involves are. You will then write up your answers clearly, develop a completely thought out response based on the ethical frameworks we are covering in class. You do not have to provide a solid black and white solution to the questions, but you should provide a clear response to the question based on your own chosen ethical framework. This is going to become more clear as we go. Right now, I just want you working on the questions, and we'll work on applying this a little bit. But let me give you an example right now. Maybe my question is it ethical for me to steal an apple from my neighbor's apple tree? My neighbor has an apple tree in her yard. She works hard on it. She loves her apple tree. But man, those apples look tasty and I want one. Is it ethical for me to just go over and grab one? Or maybe we could complicate it. Her apples fall on my side of the fence. Are those apples now mine? Can I just eat it? Even though I know she doesn't want me on her property and she doesn't want me eating her apples. That question might be answered with divine command theory. Divine command theory says, thou shalt not steal. Particularly if we're using a divine command theory with the 10 Commandments as our basic text. Thou shalt not steal. The question, of course, becomes, what is stealing? Is it stealing for me to walk onto her property and take an apple? Is it stealing for me to take an apple that's landed on my side of the property and claim it as mine? It may not be stealing for me to walk onto her property and take an apple if the world is owned by all of us, if nature is owned by all of us. It's improper for her to claim nature as part of her own. So this can be complicated. This can grow into something much more interesting than just, can I steal an apple? But you have to apply the ethical framework to it. Your work, number 4, your work must show evidence of college-level thinking, reading and writing, and college-level effort. You've got to put some work into this. I want to be able to see that you're thinking through this and that you're thinking through how you present your stuff as college work. Your work must include a works cited page of any sources you use. So if you decide to quote al-Ghazali, or you just decide to use Aquinas or Plato, then you've got to have works cited page with that. You may not use AI to write, create images, or provide sources for this project unless you do so with clear permission from me. And you're going to need to convince me why AI is necessary to do in this case. And really, the only way that I think it might be necessary, might be useful, is if you were using AI to create an image. That might be possible. But if it's to help you write the text or to help you provide sources, I don't think it's as appropriate there. In any event, if you don't clear it with me, however you use it, you are walking down the road to academic dishonesty. So students who use AI without permission or do not adequately cite sources will fail the assignment due to academic dishonesty. Finally, let's get to the point of presentation. You can present your question and response in any logical way you see fit, so long as it is clear to your audience what the question is and how your response deals with ethics. Some ways of presenting your work might include 3 mini essays, about a page each, 3 TikTok videos, 3 posters, 3 blog posts, 3 dioramas, 3 Socratic dialogues, 3 advice columns, 3 short comic books, 3 something else that you might think of. The point here is that you are presenting your work in a consistent way across these 3 questions, and you're doing it in a way that's engaging. Projects will be graded on completion and the following of the assignment guidelines, accuracy and use of ethical frameworks, development of ethical questions, and effort and care in producing college-level work. Projects will not be graded on artistic skill, grammatical correctness, or whether or not I agree with you. So this is your first major project for the class. You can go in the syllabus and find out how much that overall project is worth for the overall grade, but you should get to work on it. And you're going to start to get to work on it by working on the ethical questions journal. The whole project will be due for workshop on October 21st. We're going to workshop these together in class and talk about them. And then you're going to need to revise it and turn the completed project in on October 28th. I said keep in mind. That should be keep in mind. You will also turn in your questions journal with your revised project. The journal will be worth about 20% of the project grade. That's the project. So start thinking about it, start working through your ideas, start developing your questions journal, and we'll talk more about this as we come back to class. Keep working. Learn how to be a philosopher as we're doing this online stuff. Again, this is not the ideal way to do it, but there's actually value in having me just do a lecture like this, because I don't usually do this in class, because I get to present the ideas in a much more clear, organized fashion. Learn how to do this on your own. Learn how to be a philosopher. Take the initiative to do your work, to check Moodle, to check your email, to send me an email, to ask questions. Take the initiative. Take control of your own education here. And then take care of yourself. Watch out for your back. It's not fun. I'll talk to you soon.